The next speaker is Ms. Wendy Cutler, former acting deputy of the USTR, Vice President and Managing Director of Washington, D.C. office, the Asia Society Policy Institute. The topic she is going to deliver a speech on is the role of U.S.-Japan cooperation TPP and regional trade architecture. Ms. Cutler, please.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you, Minister Amari, for your comments. I see you're staying. I wasn't going to badmouth you, but now I really won't. This is my first visit back to Tokyo since the conclusion of TPP. I have left the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative, and now I'm at the Asia Society, committed to work to strengthen the U.S.-Asian relationship and to bring the Asian perspective to Washington and to Washington's policy debate. This visit is very different than my recent visits to Tokyo, which had me tucked away in meeting rooms day after day, night after night, with just enough time to return to my hotel room and start another day. I think I've seen more of Tokyo in the past 24 hours than I've seen over the past several years. And I would like to thank the host of USJI for inviting me to join such a distinguished group of presenters, both from Japan and the United States. And I'm truly honored to follow Minister Amari. I have the deepest respect for him and his team, and I see my good friend Ambassador Oe as well in the audience, who also did an incredible job pushing for Japan's interest in the negotiation, along with Ambassadors Suroka and Ambassador Mori. There was much skepticism and concern from TPP partners when Japan started expressing interest about joining the negotiations 3 years ago. Some question whether Japan was prepared to make the tough decisions on agriculture, whether it could speak with one voice at the negotiating table, and whether it was possible to absorb such a large trading partner into the negotiations 2 years into the talks. But Minister Amari and his team, under the leadership of the Prime Minister, proved these skeptics wrong. The Japanese team hit the ground running in these talks, and the rest is history. It's hard to believe that TPP was concluded just about 2 months ago. Sometimes it seems like it was concluded yesterday. Sometimes it seems like it was concluded 10 years ago. After participating in many negotiating rounds and many ministerials, the Atlanta meetings seem very different. One couldn't help but feel that this meeting just had a different flavor and a distinct urgency to it. Countries were moving on issues that were stuck for many years. Ministers agreed to delay their departures for several days despite other commitments. And 3, the weather helped. It was cloudy and rainy the whole week, and so there was nothing really to do except to keep meeting. When ministers met for the concluding meeting at 7 a.m. on a Monday morning on October 5th to confirm the successful conclusion of the negotiations, you didn't have to study the faces around the room closely to see expressions of sheer joy, deep-seated relief, and of course, sheer exhaustion. This success sets the stage for my remarks this afternoon. I would like to discuss why TPP is so important from a U.S. perspective and the role that close U.S.-Japan cooperation played in bringing it to successful conclusion. I'll also touch upon the next steps in the U.S. congressional ratification process, discuss the impact the TPP is already having on the region and is likely to have, and how the U.S. and Japan can continue to collaborate closely in the next stages of TPP, as well as in other regional initiatives. Now, first, why is TPP so important? Minister Omari's done an excellent job in really touching upon all the elements of the importance. Let me just touch on a few from the U.S. perspective. First of all, it's the most significant trade agreement since the Uruguay round of trade negotiations. It's comprehensive, which means all sectors are covered and there are no product exclusions. It's high standard. It goes way beyond the WTO rules and goes beyond what we've agreed to in recent free trade agreements. It deals with new issues emerging in the region, including data flows, state-owned enterprises, and trade secrets. It embodies the values of US, Japan, and the other TPP countries with respect to transparency, corporate governance, and anti-corruption. It boosts economic growth and job creation in this dynamic region. It demonstrates that like-minded countries can come together and conclude a high standards deal. It is a template for future agreements. And indeed, some TPP rules and norms are likely to take hold in the region regardless of TPP membership as countries try to compete in a TPP world. And of course, there are many, many strategic benefits underscoring the U.S. commitment and long-term engagement in the region while continuing to peace and stability in the region. TPP was indeed a remarkable accomplishment. Many factors were working against this deal, and the negotiators faced many challenges. First, just the sheer number of issues, which are captured in 30 chapters on rules, as well as thousands of pages on tariff elimination and other details. And it wasn't just the sheer number of issues, it was also which issues were included, whether it be Japan agriculture, Vietnam labor, and a bunch of issues that really affected the US sensitivities. They were all embodied in this agreement. Second, the number of countries and their diversity of development. And indeed, we were negotiating with countries that we had free trade agreements with already and countries where we did not have free trade agreements. And third, there was no hard deadline for this negotiation. In the beginning, I think many of us thought that this APEC leaders meeting will be the end, but then many APEC leaders meetings came and went without an agreement. And why this was such a challenge is that countries just didn't know when to make their last concession or play their last card or really negotiate on their bottom line. But indeed, the negotiators overcame these challenges, and what resulted was a carefully balanced outcome of priorities and sensitivities among all 12. There is no room for renegotiation without tipping this balance and leading to the unraveling of TPP. Now, another big challenge in the negotiation faced by the 9 members of that time was whether to include new members into the negotiation, given that the negotiation had already been 3 years in train, or did it make more sense to ask additional countries to wait? And this debate was largely spurred by Japan's interest in TPP. And as Japan debated TPP participation domestically and what this would mean for Japan's future, there was a spirited debate in the United States on this topic as well. There was concern in the United States that it was late to absorb such a big country in the negotiations, with one we didn't have an FTA with. There was genuine skepticism on whether Japan could indeed open up its agriculture market. There was concern what Japan's participation would mean with respect to congressional support, largely based on the auto issue. And there was concern with respect to Japan's negotiating structure. Others in the United States advocated that Japan was indeed serious about joining TPP. It wanted to reform, it wanted to change, and it wanted to open up its market. And TPP was a unique opportunity to do so. They also argued that a strong Japanese economy was in the US and the global economic interest, and TPP would help revitalize the Japanese economy and spur reform. And it was not lost that Japan's inclusion would raise the value and elevate the regional interest in TPP, which indeed it did. And when you fast forward the negotiations to Atlanta, we achieved success, and Japan was a close and important negotiating partner. There was a marked difference in these negotiations from earlier days of US-Japan negotiations, and I see Glenn Fukushima in the audience. He knows those days very well, so do I. This time in the TPP, Japan wanted to be at the negotiating table. In the other days when we negotiated semiconductors or autos, telecommunications, insurance, Japan did not want to be at the negotiating table with us. And when you have someone across the table who wants to be there, by definition, it makes it an easier and a more cooperative and productive negotiation. And indeed, we cooperated with Japan in a wide variety of areas. With respect to the rules, from IPR to services, to e-commerce to investment, Japan played a leadership and a constructive role in close coordination with the US, but also with other countries around the table. Even on the difficult issues of agriculture and autos, we had a shared interest in reaching an acceptable outcome. Indeed, we went through many ups and downs in this part of the negotiations, which were extremely politically charged on both sides, but I never doubted our joint ability to work together to find a path forward. As the two largest TPP partners, we were in frequent and intense engagement, and other TPP countries were closely watching what was going on between the United States and Japan and assessing our bilateral progress as an important sign of where these negotiations were headed and how fast they could be concluded. The solid progress we made during the April 2014 visit of President Obama to Tokyo, and again around the Prime Minister's state visit to Washington last April, contributed important momentum to the talks. And our strong cooperation ultimately led us to Atlanta when all 12 countries were able to seal the deal. And it wasn't just any deal. It was a high-standard, comprehensive deal with enormous economic and strategic benefits for the US, for Japan, and for the other TPP countries. But this is not the end of the story. Negotiations and successful conclusion of negotiations is a very important step, but there are additional steps to be taken as well. And now the activity on TPP has largely shifted to the capitals of the TPP countries, as each country works to gain support of their publics and legislatures for the deal. Each country has their own domestic process for gaining legislative approval, with the US process perhaps being the most complex and difficult to understand. The procedures detailed in Trade Promotion Authority bill passed by Congress last July is really dictating the US procedures. With notification of the TPP deal to Congress on November 5th, the US domestic procedures as mandated under Trade Promotion Authority are now in full swing. The administration, in close consultation with Congress, will decide when to submit TPP, the implementing bill, and its associated reports to Congress. And once Congress receives this package, it has up to 90 working days to vote up or down on the bill. But it's important to note that the full 90-day period is rarely used. Once a schedule is worked out between Congress and the administration, the bills can move rather quickly through both houses of Congress. President Obama has made it very clear that he wants the deal approved during his presidency, and many predict that the administration will submit the deal to Congress at the earliest possible date next year. In the meantime, key congressional leadership, including Chairmans Hatch and Ryan, have said they will need time to review the deal and make up their minds after reviewing the deal in detail and hearing from their constituents. Others in Congress and certain candidates running for president have indicated their opposition to the deal already. But I urge those in the audience not to get discouraged, nor to question the ability of the administration to get the TPP deal passed next year. This is American politics, pure and simple. For at the end of the day, to gain approval of the deal in Congress, a simple majority in both chambers of Commerce is needed. I've lived and worked through a lot of trade votes during my almost 30-year career at USTR, and I can attest that each one of these trade votes is difficult, and TPP will be no exception. But I remain optimistic that the deal will be approved next year. The benefits of the TPP deal are strong and clear, while the consequences of letting this deal languish on the shelf for the next administration to tackle are serious and unimaginable. Now let me move briefly on what TPP conclusion means for the region and where U.S.-Japan cooperation fits into the equation. We are already seeing important signals that TPP is providing important momentum for trade liberalization in the region. There is growing interest in TPP accession. Just after the announcement of conclusion of TPP, Korea, the Philippines, Indonesia, Taiwan, and Thailand have indicated varying degrees of interest in joining TPP. And others, including China, are paying attention and saying that they need to study the deal more closely now that it's public before taking a position. I noted that when the leaders and ministers met in KL, they reviewed the status of the RCEP negotiations, and they issued a statement saying that they're going to aim to conclude these talks next year. And I have to believe that by not rushing to conclude the RCEP negotiations this year, that countries are looking how to make this deal more robust and more trade liberalizing in the wake of the TPP conclusion. We're also witnessing announcements with regard to upgrading current FTAs. And I note that in early November, Singapore and China announced that they would upgrade their 2009 free trade agreement to address such issues as investment, services, trade facilitation, e-commerce, and the environment. Furthermore, I believe TPP already is and will lead to domestic reforms and market opening now by countries in the region who are not part of TPP as they prepare to compete in a TPP world. These are just few of the immediate impacts of TPP, and they all surround the pressing question on where regional economic integration is headed and what is the best pathway to get there. TPP is not the only game in town. I mentioned that the RCEP negotiations are underway. APEC is working on a study of the free trade area of the Asia Pacific due to leaders next year. Japan is participating in trilateral negotiations with its neighbors. The ASEAN's just announced an economic community, and the list goes on and on. And as these efforts sort themselves out in the region, I believe that the U.S. and Japan have a solid footing for close cooperation going forward. And areas for cooperation include, first, working together to urge the other 10 countries to approve the deal as soon as possible and to take the steps necessary to bring the TPP deal into force. Second, I think the U.S. and Japan should coordinate closely regarding accession of potential new members to the TPP. Third, I think we should coordinate closely and exchange information and updates on other initiatives in the region. And here, I think Japan has a really important role to play as a participant in the RCEP and the CJK negotiations to push for higher standards and ensure that there are no inconsistencies with TPP. And finally, we should coordinate closely as we work with other APEC partners on drafting the contents and recommendations for the free trade area of the Asia-Pacific study to be presented to APEC leaders next November. In conclusion, I view TPP as a transformational step in broader and deeper U.S.-Japan economic cooperation and coordination. As close partners in TPP, the table is now set for our two countries to work together seamlessly to help shape a high standards, rules-based, and inclusive regional trading regime. Thank you very much.